Welcome to the Final Girls podcast, where we explore the intersections of horror, film, and feminism. This is Anna, co-founder of the Final Girls and your podcast host. While our current season is all about female monsters, occasionally on this podcast we'll cover new films or series that we really want to talk about, that we're excited. Stuff I really just want to watch, okay? And today's bonus episode is all about The Haunting of Bly Manor, the new series by creator Mike Flanagan and a loose sequel to the extremely creepy and extremely successful Haunting on Hill House. While Hill House was based on the Shirley Jackson novel, Bly Manor loosely adapts The Turn of the Screw, the 1898 horror novella by Henry James. And if you haven't seen Hill House, not to worry, this is an entirely self-contained series with different characters. Although Flanagan does reuse some of his cast from Hill House, including Victoria Pedretti, Oliver Jackson Cohen, Kate Siegel, and Carla Gugino. Also joining them in the cast are Amelia Eve, Tania Miller, and Raoul Coley. The series just premiered this very Friday on Netflix, and for those listeners who are undecided about whether they are ready to binge the whole thing, we're going to be doing a spoiler-free section at the beginning with our general thoughts on the show, and then dive straight into a totally spoilerific discussion for those maniacs, like me, that binge the whole thing in a day or two. And joining me to discuss the series in depth is writer and podcaster Louise Blaine, host of the Killed podcast and contributor to many more, including this one and our friends at the Evolution of Horror podcast. Louise, hello. Welcome back.
Hi, Anna. Thank you. How are you?
I am nervous about talking about this with you.
Uh-oh. I mean, I've got gin. Do you have gin?
I always have gin when we record together.
See? That's my favorite thing. But why could you possibly be nervous, Anna? What would you possibly have to be nervous about talking to little old me?
Well, let's find out over the course of the next, I don't know how many hours.
It will take time, won't it?
So what we're going to do is, for people who haven't binge watched the whole series of Bly Manor yet, first of all, what are you doing? Second of all,
you've still got time. You still have time. I mean, it's okay, guys. I mean, it is 9 hours long.
The first part of the conversation is going to be spoiler free. So if you haven't watched it, or you've watched the first couple of episodes, we're not going to spoil the anything major about the show, any twists, not the ending. And then I will give a warning and we'll have a little break before we go into the spoilerific discussion. So I'll leave the timestamp in the show notes so you can go directly there after you've seen the whole series. So let's kick off straight away. To begin with, are you, generally speaking, a fan of Mike Flanagan's work and The Haunting of Hill House, the previous series?
I am a huge fan of Mike Flanagan's work. So I love The Haunting of Hill House. I love Hush. I think he makes very interesting things that I really... I mean, Hill House for me, and I think Hill House for a lot of people, is a lofty, lofty height. And I think I want to say straight away, before we get into anything else, I do not think Bly Manor is the same as Hill House. I do not think it is of the same standard as Hill House, because I think Hill House is genuinely elevated horror, and not in that bullshit way, not in that elevated horror where it's actually smart horror. I mean elevated horror in the fact that it sits above all the rest of the horror, because it is phenomenal in its balancing of mental health and scares and heartfelt loveliness. But Bly Manor for me, and not for you, is still excellent.
I said no spoilers, Louise. But you actually bring up a really interesting point that I was going to ask you about, and it's the expectations set by Hill House are so major, and perhaps a little bit unfair to place those set of expectations on Bly Manor. So how would you generally compare them in terms of tone, but also scares?
I would certainly say that Hill House is significantly clearer in its scares. I do feel like Bly Manor is a haunting in the sense of, you are in a haunted house, but this is about people, this is about characters. I mean, this is actually, it's about love and relationships and an abandoned family and children. And I feel like what I've really embraced in it, sort of comparing it to Hill House, was its sort of classical nature. I loved the fact that it was like a big, rich ghost story that I felt lots of expectations around. And I did spend, you know, and I think the expectations from Hill House, people are automatically looking for hidden ghosts, right? You're looking for hidden ghosts. And I spent a lot of time looking at the background, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but there are things in the background that I found exceptionally enriching to my experience, potentially at times where even the show itself wasn't giving me scares, but the background was. And I think the idea that, I mean, the first time I watched Hill House, I didn't know about the hidden ghosts. I binged it when it came out. Like, I think it was the day it came out, and I didn't know about the hidden ghosts, and it really scared me afterwards when I watched all those YouTube videos of these hidden things in the background that had been there the whole time. I felt like I had been haunted because I hadn't seen those. And I think with Bly Manor, knowing that they were there, they enriched my experience the first time around. So, you know, Danny arrives to look after these kids in this house, and you automatically, this is a trope that you understand. This is a trope that we've been to many haunted houses with many creepy kids and many echoey, shadowy places. But I felt like that was like a reassuring, lovely comfort blanket, as opposed to, I think Hill House was scarier by its very nature.
And it's interesting that you mention it kind of working as a comfort blanket, because it does tap into a lot of tropes and a lot of kind of predictable, almost behavior, predictable scares. What did you think of it as an adaptation? And in the same way as Haunting of Hill House is a very loose adaptation of the book, this is a very loose adaptation of The Turn of the Screw.
It is very loose, but also I think it takes, and I haven't read a lot of Henry James's other works, and apparently it does take a lot from those, so I now need to read a lot of those to find out. I really need to do my homework on my homework, because the first time around, I thought it was just Turn of the Screw. I was like, I know what I'm coming in for here, this is fine. But I do think that, again, knowing it's an adaptation, you go in with this kind of classical idea of what it will be, and I did feel like it was this big, sumptuous, almost BBC drama style experience, rather than, I think the modernity of Hill House draws people in a lot more. It kind of grabs them by the throat, so to speak. And I think in Bly Manor, in that case, you do feel slightly distanced from it, I suppose, because it's what 80s?
Yeah, it's set in the late 80s.
Yeah.
Do you think that works, that distance?
I really like it because I think it feels alien, and it brings you back to the time of no phones, and it means that things can feel quite old-fashioned, and they can feel abandoned, and they can feel isolated in a way that 2020 just doesn't do for us. You know, we don't feel, I think it's crazy, isn't it, the fact that we can look at ghost stories and be like, well, if you just said it 20 years ago, it makes it a lot scarier because you can't just phone the police. Like, that's weird. But it distances enough because, as we know, and I'm not going to spoil anything, it goes back further in time. So it's almost this portal to go back further and experience the history of the house. So it becomes a significantly more historical period piece the more you get through it. So actually, I really enjoy these multiple layers of Bly as well as just the 80s setting.
And I mean, you mentioned Danny, our protagonist, a little bit before, but a lot of it, at least for the first couple of episodes, hinges on her and of us empathizing with her and also being afraid for her. Because, and you know, this is not a spoiler, this is very much kind of from the very first episode, she's haunted herself. So what did you think of Danny Clayton as our protagonist?
I love her. And I love the fact that we are getting it's Victoria Pendretti,
yes,
isn't it?
That's
her, so, and I love that we're getting her not as a monster or as someone, you know, haunting other people. She is our central protagonist. I love that flip from Hill House. I think that's a wonderful thing. But I really like her, and I really feel for her. And gradually, and when we go into spoiler territory, I think I really relate to her in many, many ways. I feel, I also am deeply attracted to the idea of a character escaping, because even in that first episode, you know, I love the conversation between her and Henry Wingrave, who's basically saying, like, what's the catch with you? Why are you here? Why are you going to give up your life for children to go into the middle of the countryside? And she basically said that, she wants an escape too. And she doesn't tell the whole truth, but she wants an escape. And I like that is alluring to me, because inevitably that character then becomes a puzzle that I would like to then unpick. So that character is a puzzle that investigates a new puzzle, but I get to take them to bits at the same time. So I do find her very appealing as a central character.
You've mentioned it a little bit before, but I find really interesting that kind of haunting is in the name. It's the core premise. But
yeah,
I don't know about you, but I didn't really find that to be what the show was really about.
No, it wasn't. And yes. Is that your problem with this, Anna? Is it not scary enough?
I will go into my myriad of problems with the show in the spoiler bit.
I can do this.
We can do this. But if not about hauntings, what did you think the show was really about?
Love. I thought it was about people and love and connections and relationships and the things that we do in order to feel connections with other people, and how wrong they go and how broken we can be in the process of being happy. So I don't find, and we will go into it in the spoiler section, but even early on in this series, it absolutely devastated me in many, many ways. I found it heartfelt and real in ways that I never expected a horror TV show to do. And I think partly why I absolutely love it, and why even if you're not enjoying the early episodes, which potentially you might have watched, you should watch further just to see what Mike Flanagan is doing here, because he's doing something which I think might be bold and seen as sentimental and not have nearly the same effect, especially in a haunt. I think where Hill House had me in the way of people were seeing things in horrible places and they were seeing their own demons reflected back at them, and Hill House Bly Manor doesn't hold those up quite as. It does have reflections. When Danny looks in a mirror, she sees reflections, but not in the same capacity as the people once they've left Hill House. And I think Bly Manor, despite being wholly set in that haunted house, doesn't have the same number of scares. But for me, the scariest thing is the loss involved rather than the hauntings itself. So I appreciate the difference in saying it's a haunting. It's a haunting in a very different capacity. It's haunting in a way that, when you're walking alone and you get that hit of melancholy and you feel slightly haunted. It's haunting in that way rather than horrible things are following you in a corridor.
God damn it, you're going to make me not hate this.
Oh, yes. See, you feel it a little bit. You do.
No, I'm feeling that beautiful monologue.
See?
So it's incredibly heartfelt the way you describe it. And, that I think potentially could not work for some people who are expecting something more like Hill House. But
completely. If
we put that to one side, do you think this works as a horror series?
I do. I don't think it's perfect. I'm not smacking, 10 points out, 10 out of 10 here. I'm not putting 5 stars on this. I think there are some uneven episodes. I think there are some janky accents. I think Peter Quint's Glasgow accent literally made me have a tick in my eye because it's almost close enough.
I'm definitely asking you about that in 1 second.
Okay. You can ask me about that. You can ask me about that accent. But I think I feel like it is uneven at points. I think there is one episode too many, especially at one stage that we'll go into in spoilerific territory. But I do think overall it works on all the levels that I wanted it to work. And actually, initially I was quite surprised by its tone and quite surprised by its content and not immediately won over, but I was by the end entirely, as you have probably just heard. I'm on board.
So before we go into spoiler territory, because I think we're both just sort of twitching.
Yes.
Who do you think would enjoy this series the most?
I think, that's interesting. I think it's an expectations thing. So I think everyone can enjoy this show. I really do. I think everyone could watch. I mean, especially if you are a horror fan that airs on the slightly more, if you're feeling slightly more emotional, if you are looking for something. I think it depends. I don't think people should be watching it on Halloween night expecting big scares. For that, you should watch Host, you should watch Haunt, you should watch Trick or Treat, you should watch any of those things. You should watch Hush if you want Mike Flanagan, you know, or Hill House. But if you know that you are going in for a ghost story, but also a gothic romance, which is what this is, it's a gothic romance, then that's what you should go in for. And that also, and if you then go mentally, I wouldn't like that, you should try it just in case. And I don't think you will feel undernourished having been served that in your eyes for 9 hours. Because it's still Mike Flanagan. It's still that crew. It is still the people that made Hill House, and they're not going to shortchange you. They're just not maybe going to scare the same pants off you as you did before.
Oh, this is going to get so intense.
Do we need another gin? I only have one gin here.
I think it's time to move on into spoiler territory.
Right, let's do it. I'm ready.
That was wonderful, and I wish I could agree with it.
Okay, that's fine. That's great. This is why we're here.
Let's come up with a story.
I know what loss is. Your parents loved you so much. In a way, they'll always be here.
It's going to sound strange, but I'm having somebody else's dream. What dreams? We're dead.
So we're now, podcast magic and all. This is now the spoiler territory. So let's dive deep into this. You mentioned that it's more like a gothic romance rather than a horror,
Yes.
but that there's a lot of stuff going on in the background.
Yes.
So talk to me about kind of those things that you think worked for you in the background of Bly Manor.
You mean subtext or literally in the background?
Both.
I mean, I'm going to start off because now we're in spoiler territory, right? Now we've seen the end.
Yes.
Everybody has seen the end of Bly Manor. So basically, I'm not gonna lie about it. The ending of Bly Manor fucking devastated me. Absolutely ruined me. I cried, Anna, from about halfway through episode 8. Because I found it so emotional, the fact that the explanation for Viola, the lady in the lake, that broke my heart. The fact that they had given this character such a backstory, such a story, and I didn't mind that its tropes lay where they did. I loved the black and white nature of that episode as well. Then my tears dried up for about 5 minutes, as I watched the start of episode 9, and then episode 9 felt like the biggest, most doomed relationship of all time, regardless of it having good intent. And then by the end, the credit came up, and I literally had to phone my friend and bawl down the phone properly. Tears, like absolutely broken. I was ruined, absolutely ruined. And I think on multiple ways. So that's what worked for me. The fact that it worked as I really related to Danny. I guess that's who I am, in the fact that she had a failed relationship with a man who she turned around and said, I wish I could make you love. I could love you like you want me to. And that broke me because I've been that person. I've been like, let me just fit in. Let me just love who I want. And, and then what happened to him. And that's massive amounts of guilt, because not only did she have the love that she never loved him, the guilt that she never loved him, she had the guilt that he then died getting out of the car after they split up. And that was not her fault. But I appreciated that guilt that she then had to then not be able to love anyone again. And I thought this was wrapped up in a ghost story about a woman who was murdered by her sister and had to wander those halls endlessly. And I loved episode 8 by the end of it. I didn't love Kate Siegel's English accent. You've got a face.
Yep.
And I was really glad that she only said like 2 lines. But I loved what that episode was doing. And I thought that episode was beautiful and sumptuous and rich. And I think I literally wrote in your face is just like, why are you thinking this? You're so wrong. That's what you're saying to me. But I literally wrote down, let me eat this episode for breakfast. Like, I loved that episode. And then I loved the next. I loved it. That latter half of that season. I'm so sorry, Anna. I feel like I'm letting you down with my sentimental heart.
I
like,
love
it broke.
listening to you, because I wish that was my experience, because I
wish it was too.
fucking hated episode 8 and 9 so much. I was yelling at the screen, and I'm not even kidding. We do this every time we record together. My note was, this is Mike Flanagan's Phantom Menace.
Oh no.
Yes.
Oh no. Oh, Anna, no.
Oh, I hated it so much. The black and white was so bad. It was grayish. It wasn't even black enough. Kate Siegel's accent.
I loved it.
It was so
Kate Siegel's accent was dreadful. It was dreadful. Her accent. I wish she hadn't just spoken.
I love the scare. I love the scare where the hands pop out.
The chest scare was great.
Yes, it was good.
That was a great
very
scare.
good.
That was a really good scare.
And I love the backstory, but
Yeah.
frankly, it could have been 15 minutes. It did not need like a full hour.
Now, funnily enough, I didn't feel like that about that episode, but I did feel like that about the uncle. I thought the uncle episode was grossly unnecessary. I thought we could... The Henry, so basically, like, I felt like he was...
the baby daddy episode.
Yes, exactly. That was an unnecessary baby daddy episode because, do you know, I feel like that could have been part of the arc. We could have unpicked that through another story, and I think by that point it had become quite obsessed with an episode for a character, which is usually actually a very good approach. Like, we've seen it in plenty of other things, and it's all usually works.
Yeah.
He didn't deserve one. So he did not deserve one.
That story was quite simple.
Yeah.
And you know what? On paper, I appreciate the tragedy of his character.
Yeah.
However, I could not focus on anything else aside from the fact that his brother was played by Garth Marenghi.
Oh no, I hadn't even noticed that.
Yeah, so I'm doing a terrible job because that's not actually the actor's name.
I hadn't noticed that. I did find him. I looked at him and recognized him, but I didn't connect.
So he was played by Matthew Holness. I might be mispronouncing this, but also the other thing that really distracted me is that both of those brothers had extremely different accents. One of them was super posh, one of them was middle class, and one of them is very clearly American.
Yes.
And not doing a very good accent.
I think it's funny, like, it's funny, isn't it, the different accents you hear? Because you were going to ask me about Peter Quint's accent, and that's because literally, obviously these screeners went out to press, and people were already messaging me going, there's an accent in Bly Manor that you're either going to love or hate. And I got to that accent and went, oof, there it is, there's the accent. And I don't hate it because it's pretty good. You know, Mel Gibson in Braveheart did a terrible Scottish accent and it was kind of acceptable. His accent is much, much better than Mel Gibson was in Braveheart. His voice goes very low, very, very low. But he does manage.
You know what? I like that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie.
See, that's the thing. I was also looking at him like, people are going to think you're really sexy with your Glasgow accent. People are going to think you're really sexy. I mean, I remain immune, you know, but...
I mean, you might be immune. I've made so many bad decisions in my life because of Scottish accents. Like...
Am I one of them, Anna? Am I one of your...
No, you're probably the best one.
Don't worry, I have been a lot of people's Scottish accent mistake as well. Don't worry about it. I'm pretty sure there's a number of women that can say Scottish accents make mistakes. I am a couple of us, so don't worry about it. We all make Scottish accent mistakes. I have been that person. It's fine. But Peter Quint, let's talk about him.
Yes.
I mean, do you agree? He is a very good bad character.
Yes.
Like, he is strong.
I thought he was very good up until the episode with his dramatic monologue.
Oh, okay.
Where he reveals his backstory.
Right, okay.
So what did you make of him as a villain?
I found him enjoyably toxic simply because I felt like there was a lot of gaslighting going on of Rebecca and us.
Yes.
Because there was this her forgiving him being absolutely disgusting and awful to her after that scene in the kitchen where obviously everyone was tasting the food, but he was a real
the batter in the mouth thing.
Yeah, the batter in the mouth thing, which was just weird. But also, can I just say how much I love Owen's puns? Like, a batter place is my favourite thing. Like, that character was written for me. But
I love Hannah. I love Owen. I would die for them.
They were wonderful.
Love
And
them.
episode 5 we will have to get onto because I do love episode 5 a lot. So
I do love episodes 5 a lot.
Yeah,
we can agree on
we
that.
can agree on that. Good. That is good. See,
But back to Peter.
Yes, he is nasty and horrible and insidious, and what I especially enjoyed about him, I mean, at the expense of Rebecca, was that she, did that ultimate price thing. She died and she was stuck there with him, and he's busy thinking this is his happily ever after to murder someone. And I think that's really interesting. Like, I think the idea of I feel what you've seen A Ghost Waits, haven't you?
I don't think I have.
It was Fright Fest, the romantic haunted house romance movie. So I won't spoil any of that, but there's a lot of falling in love with ghosts and having relationships with people who are ghosts. So if we think about Ghost, for instance, the ways that things should happen in Ghost is that the living should live and the dead kind of need to stay dead. And I think it did some very interesting things throughout Bly Manor where it really pivoted those thoughts, where you decided, well, it would just be great if everyone was dead together. But then you know that if you stay in Bly Manor dead, you're going to lose your face and your humanity and all of your memories, and it's going to suck. It's going to be terrible because Viola is going to suck you dry because she's so sad. So I did think the use of Peter to kind of be like, this will solve everything if you just die. It's like, will it though? So I liked that element of him, and his toxic nature was grim. The bit where he grabbed her wrist when she was trying to leave was just vindictive and awful, and I loved it.
Yeah, I loved him as a villain up until that point, which I'll explain in a bit. It's like, because I love that aspect of him. He was incredibly charming, really alluring. Like, you could see why Rebecca would be, seduced by him. Why? Yeah. And, it's not just, because the actor who plays him is really hot, or his Scottish accent, although those two things obviously play into it.
Also, at one point,
they go hand in hand.
At one point, I swear he was wearing Chris Evans' jumper from Knives Out.
I know exactly what scene you mean.
Yeah, he was.
I know exactly what scene.
Good jumper.
Yes. And even like that intense possessiveness and jealousy, obviously those are not attractive features, but it's a very recognizable type of villain and a very recognizable type of real life person as well. And particularly, obviously, not everyone, but very particularly in these type of almost illicit romantic relationships. Yeah. So it's a trope and a type of character that we're very familiar with seeing. And I thought that Oliver was playing him really, really well.
Yeah.
And then the explanation. And this is the thing that broke it for me, because it was so interesting, and you're so absolutely right. Like, he was so convinced that even after he died, he still needed to have Rebecca, and that of course, even though he said that he loved her, and even though they were having this very lovely affair, actually his possessive and disgusting nature was still the dominating trait of his. Even after death, he was still more preoccupied with his own selfishness of, I don't want to be alone, so I would rather you die. And even when she had her doubts, he created a scenario where he effectively murdered her from beyond the grave when he possessed her and walked into the lake. he murdered her. Like, there's no other way of interpreting this. It was not suicide. And also, obviously, the way that we're presented the idea or the personality of Rebecca before we see the backstory, that whole kind of unraveling of the truth and the idea that people had of her, the people who were still living, was really interesting. And once we knew more about both of them together and both of them as individuals as well, that slow unfolding of it until we got to their episodes, I really enjoyed.
Yeah,
because they're both such dynamic performance. I thought the chemistry between them was really great.
They were excellent.
But then the explanation. So I'm talking specifically about the his own dream cycle, where he goes backwards and goes back to this one memory, this one confrontation with his mother, that he remembers as an adult. And he has this whole speech, this very, actor speech about being abused as a child and his mother allowing and standing by that abuse. And honestly, sometimes I just think, let a dickhead be a dickhead.
I mean,
like, I know all about the cycles of abuse and all of that stuff, and I think it's just lazy writing. Sometimes people are assholes, and sometimes people are mean and bad and they're selfish, and that's okay. That makes for great movie villains and series villains. We don't need to have to sympathize with Peter Quint. He was perfectly good as he was. Good is not the right word, but you know what you mean. He was a good character, and now you made him sad. So now we have to excuse him because he is a victim of abuse. Sorry, that just felt like lazy writing to me.
It's funny. After that, I didn't feel like I had to excuse him. And it's funny the fact that you say that about movie villains, because I really, really, really hated Rob Zombie's Halloween. Because he gave Michael Myers an abuse upbringing story, and nobody needed to know that, because Michael Myers just killed people. That was what was scary. And I can't remember, that was in something quite recently, and it was like, I watched it and it was like, Michael Myers just killed people, and that's fucking terrifying. And that is genuinely, and I understand that need for, that's who Peter Quint was, because he was a nasty piece of work. I get it. And I suppose I think I forgave it that, because I still felt like, despite the fact that that had been in his past, he could still recognize what good things were and what he had and what he loved, and he still completely rejected them. So I think I still thought, like, I think I was like, meanwhile you were like, no, that's not an excuse. I was like, that's no excuse. Like, you're still terrible. So I think we're both we're different sides of basically what's the same coin there. But I completely appreciate it. I appreciate it entirely. I understand that. I really do.
I wanted him to be more terrible, which I don't know what that says about me.
Yeah. I mean, he was pretty terrible. He murdered Hannah Gross.
Yes. That's a really nice segue. Thank you to talk about the best characters in Bly Manor. Hannah and Owen.
Yep.
Please. What did you think of them?
Oh, my words. It was just, when I think that's another reason to watch Bly Manor is those two characters. Absolutely. Like, those performances are wonderful. Those characters are just, again, like that comfort blanket of, I could just watch you talk. Being in your presence is relaxing. And that repeat, especially for Hannah, where she was going back to her interview with him over and over again. I felt like I was coming home at the same time as she was, because their conversation, and he was so honest with her, and they were in love in a different kind of way that was just wonderful and charming and sweet, and they were really the heart of that house. And I guess that's part of why a lot of people, and I guess why yourself, doesn't love it as much, because if you were watching this in another environment, if you were watching this in something that you didn't think was the second season of Hill House, you might enjoy the whole season, like it's because it didn't feel like a ghost story. It felt like it was just lovely, and I genuinely felt with every atom of my being for those characters.
I couldn't agree with you more, to be honest. With Hannah and Owen, my heart broke for them. They were lovely, they were funny, they were incredibly well written. The chemistry between them is amazing. I wanted to watch more of them. Episode 5 is probably my favorite episode of the season.
It was wonderful.
And it was the one that brought me back. I was not enjoying the show. I was hesitant
Yeah.
about the show. And then episode 5 happened, and I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
This is going to be the
This
turning
is the
point.
one. Yeah.
And then it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
But that episode, that conversation and that dynamic and the unfolding of their quiet love story as well,
Yeah.
I loved.
Yeah, I think I think the reveal in that episode was really clever actually as well. Like, I don't know if I think we both do the thing where we write all the notes all the time. And obviously you were writing about Phantom Menace and I was writing about, why do we never see her eat anything? She's always already eaten.
Good spot.
So every
Yeah,
time she didn't eat, she did drink wine at the fire, but she never ate anything. She'd always already eaten, or someone would take a plate away from her. All of these things, and you're like, why is she not eating? Because I think you have a certain thing when you're watching horror. You're like, well, I'm looking for strange things, and you haven't eaten anything so far. And why is that? Is it because you're a zombie? Are you dead? What's wrong with you? So she was I already had a question mark over her as to she was off and she was otherworldly and sometimes away, and we didn't quite understand why she was so away a lot of the time. And as we know now, it was because she was constantly drifting through different periods of the house and just disappearing because she was dead. And I think I loved that dream logic as well. I loved the effortless going through explaining. So we learned so much in that episode, and it was one of those smart things where I think one thing that Mike Flanagan does so well is that he lines things up and he gives you mini mysteries, and he gives you all these tiny mysteries, and then he will give you the answers to every single little bit of those mysteries. Like, you're never left going, but why was that? Never happens. And episode 5 was a giant answer to so many questions that we were then had answered again for us in episode 8.
Maybe a little too much. But did you see it coming then? Or did the reveal of Hannah having been dead the whole time work for you? And also, who murdered her?
In my eyes, I was expecting something to happen. I didn't expect it to be as beautifully placed as the well. The idea that Dani had come up literally as she was looking in at her own body is quite fascinating. That was a wonderful, wonderful link to where we are now, because I think that's the thing that Bly Manor works with very well, because it's working in multiple time periods with multiple histories and multiple families and multiple situations going on in that house, and it does a very, very good job of jumping between them. And I think her episode makes a very, very good link between those things. And it was Peter that murdered her completely, in my eyes.
I want to come back to that in a second, but actually what I find more interesting that you're pointing out is the dream logic and also the time hopping.
Yes.
So I think you put it really well, and I do agree with you that episode kind of reinvigorates the season, or at least it did for me, by introducing or kind of opening up our eyes to things that were already there, and that we are operating in a dream logic, but also that there's a very particular landscape for the ghosts of Bly Manor.
Yes.
That is totally different.
Yeah.
So if you're expecting the same kind of ghost logic or ghost dimension as in Hill House, it's radically different.
Yeah.
And I'm always fascinated by how filmmakers or writers create the rules of the afterlife for their series.
Yes.
So what did you think? And did you think it all worked and tied together in Bly Manor? The way the ghosts lived on and then operated in both within their memories, the dreams, and the spaces?
I did. I quite quickly, initially I was quite confused, as we all are, but I think it very quickly sort of gave us that logic of, if you're not here, then you're going through your past. You're falling. Although Hannah seemed to have a very different way of doing things, where she seemed to be able to see multiple sort of eras or other people's memories. She was quite unique that way. But I appreciated that I knew that she had a different logic from everyone else. I think that's quite a strange thing to say, but I understood their logic. I understood that if they died there, they stayed there. I like that as a concept. It's obviously like it's like Murder House, right? You're trying to drag the bodies onto the premises to die so that they can hang around. Like, I think there's something very attractive about that in a weird, grim way, where it's just like, well, if you stay here, you'll stay. And for a moment, that feels appealing, doesn't it? That to stay with the humans, and it's not.
Yeah, of course. And they make it, I think the kind of the interesting addition is the fact that there is decay
Yes.
with the ghosts.
Yes.
The fact that they do decay, the fact that they lose the only thing that they're made of,
Yeah.
out of is the memories of who they were as humans.
Yeah.
And that is obviously very extensively explained to us
Yeah.
in episode 8.
I will I will say
Explained and explained.
I will say that there were too many wake, walk, sleep. I think there was a couple more than there potentially should have been. But I was so in by then. You know, I was really in by then that this... I felt like I'd had everything explained to me in just the right way. I think that was my thing. I felt like you've just made this not just logical, you've not just explained the science of how this... Because I love that, the fact that there are rules, there's science to all of them. I mean, whatever we're watching, whether you're watching, gosh, Insidious and you're clambering into the beyond or whatever it is, it has a logic, it has a science. And I did enjoy the fact that she was the explanation for that. And that that her... by the very nature of her repetition, and that was almost delivered to us. I mean, you could say that was very, very intentional. Of that was her life, and that was what we were then being served. Repetition. This is what's going to happen to you. You will do this over and over and over again until you find it uncomfortable. So actually, I'm not defending it, and I did feel like it was. I mean, it was certainly a bold move, but at the same time, I did appreciate the fact it was like, this is a cycle. And we are being hammered over the head with this cycle. And I liked the fact that then explained the last, 7 episodes of the behaviour of the children, why things had been the same where it was. I mean, I love the idea that doll is under the chest of drawers because that's the lake. Like, that's a wonderful thing. And I think I forgave it, any of those inconsistencies, for that very nice conceit, I think. Maybe I'm just too forgiving, Anna.
I like the conceit. Don't get me wrong. I like the conceit. I despise the delivery.
Oh,
I'm
it hurts
so
me,
sorry.
Anna.
I feel like
It hurts me.
I'm so sorry. I don't want to hurt you.
Oh,
I just like,
it's okay.
if you're gonna do with any sort of series, like if I want to see a Lav DS film for 4 hours and meditate on the cycle of repetition and patterns of human behavior, I'm gonna go see a Lav DS film for 4 hours. I don't need it served to me in the form of a horror TV show.
Okay.
I'm trying not to be brutal. It didn't work for me. I think I completely agree with you in the conceit. I like the explanation because I'm interested in ghost politics, and like I said before, I'm interested in the explanations that the filmmakers can come up with. And I actually really like the idea of ghosts deteriorating. Yeah. I just wish it was better executed.
Okay.
And shorter. But that kind of brings me on to the idea of this Lady of the Lake.
Yes.
Of Viola and her story, which we're told. What did you think of the idea of ghosts deteriorating and the way that they are in the house in Bly Manor, sort of interacting with some characters, sort of dream hopping in their own memories.
Yep.
But did they seem, maybe scary is not the right word, but did they seem present enough to you?
Do you know, it's interesting. You know, I think had I not been looking in the background for something and for everything standing there, which I felt like was very obvious. Were they obvious to you? I felt like they were very obvious, except one of my I'm going to talk about my favourite hidden ghost. Do you remember?
Go for it.
Do you remember early on, she came running out of the house because there was the plague doctor was in the children's room, and then the plague doctor again was at the back of the corridor, and then she ran outside. Did you spot the plague doctor behind the hedge on the left-hand side?
No, I don't think I did.
It is the scariest shot in the whole movie, in the whole TV series, because she runs, other than the chest grabbing, she runs out of the house and she does this thing where she looks left and right as if she's looking for something. And I'm screaming at Danny going, it's right there. It's behind the tree, because you can see the long nose poking out behind the tree.
Yeah.
I don't think it's terribly obvious. It's not a twig. But at the same time, I found that genuinely unnerving because it lingered on it long enough. It lingered there long enough for you to see it. And if you saw it, you got this horrible chill of the thing of there's things, even when you think that you are safe, there are things there. And that did that for me. So I did feel that things were present. I did feel like the nasty things were present enough. I felt if I hadn't been seeing the things in the background, I kind of wish I'd seen Viola a little more. Because at one point we saw her crossing the hallway. And I think I could have done with a bit more of that because that is scary. The idea of the lady in white is a scary thing. It's an intrinsically scary thing. And I think I'm also I'm such a sucker for this, Anna, because I have an extreme fear of headless things, but also faceless things.
Yes.
And that was horrible. The faceless thing was horrible. Like really ghastly, and not just smooth, because there were kind of indentations for the eyes, and that imagery was scary, and there was more scary imagery. I mean, there wasn't the bent neck lady, but there was scary imagery, and children running around with no faces, also scary in my eyes.
I mean,
but
children
potentially,
in general.
Exactly, but potentially I do understand not enough for a lot of people after being literally pooing themselves at the jump scare in the middle of Hill House. I get it. I really do. It's not.
Although
it's
I
not
will
that.
say, the moment where Peter Quinn gets murdered by the Lady of the Lake, was a legit scare.
It was great,
and that worked so well.
Yes.
I thought, like, it was a fantastic death scene. It was slow,
and he deserved it too.
Yes, he did.
He really deserved it.
And she really just the fact that it was so dragged out, literally. She dragged him by the neck. But also it's because it's smooth and slow and everybody's just there watching him die in slow motion. I found that to be very effective. But I wanted to pick up on something you were mentioning, and it's the design of the ghosts, the facelessness, the indentations. And I have to bring up the only ghost that is not from Bly Manor, which is Danny's ex-boyfriend, ex-fiance. Yes.
Headlight man.
Oh yeah, or Elijah Wood from Sin City.
That was the problem. He was Elijah Wood from Sin City. I didn't find him so scary as such, but I found him quite unnerving. And I think I already knew that he was a puzzle. I looked at him and I was like, you are a puzzle. You are a puzzle I want to solve. I'm going to find out about you. I know why you're going to have reflective eyes, and that's going to be a reason. And then, so by the time he got out of the car, I was like, oh, that's going to reflect in your eyes. And that reflects in your eyes. But it certainly didn't bother me. And I did like the fact that I loved the whole reflection element of everything. I love the fact that even once she was rid of him, she got Viola. And she was looking in her reflection for the reflection for her. So I think while I didn't find him particularly terrifying, I found him quite annoying. But I found him annoying in a sense as well, because I wanted her to be rid of him, and I was shouting at her that he's not your fault. You didn't mean that. Like, you were just trying to be a good person and do what everyone expected you to do. I was doing a lot of projection with that episode. I get it. I really do. I do get it.
Also, he had a terrible reaction to her as well.
Yeah.
Not saying he deserved to die, but also not a great reaction.
Not a good reaction. No, he was a bit of a dick. They did manage to kind of level that off a little bit. And I think on a just a general thematic note, sexuality wise, I found it so important. And it was something that obviously we had in Hill House as well, which was wonderful. But I loved the fact that the central romance was two women. I loved it. It was empowering and sweet, and it didn't make a big deal out of it. But it was just this wonderful, effortless thing. And I think I found that particularly refreshing. It wasn't a side character, it was her. And, that was the tragedy, that was the doom of that was her. So yes. But yes, relatable.
Let's talk then about Danny and Jamie.
Yes. Let's
Obviously,
do that.
I can imagine that you love them.
I did. They were goals. But they weren't goals. They weren't goals. I enjoyed how complex they were. I liked how hard to get but also snuggly Jamie was. I liked her backstory of the fact that, you know, plants are great because I loved that she was a sweet character that I enjoyed and that I had a crush on from quite early on, and was really glad that they actually had a tragedy ever after. But, you know, for the years or whatever they had together, I was really pleased. And I didn't feel, and what I found was really interesting, and I wondered if there'll be any discussion around this, and usually the discussion of kill your gays obviously comes up. But I actually found that it really manipulated that idea, because everyone in that gothic romance was doomed. Whether you were, whoever you were, that universe does not discriminate at all. It is equal miserable opportunities, and they had a better, happier existence than a lot of the people in that. So they actually got their happily ever after, and Dani was the hero that literally, sadly, had to sacrifice herself for, again, because of Viola. So I enjoyed their relationship. I enjoyed its complexity. Sometimes I was furious at it. You know, I was just like, just tell each other things. Just speak, both of you. But now I am at the age I am, I understand that people don't just say how they feel. So I did find them enjoyably complex, and as enjoyably complex as Rebecca and Peter. You know, there was a not the same toxic level of anything, but there was the same relationship complexity that I appreciated. That was a long answer to a short question. Sorry.
No, that was a really beautiful answer. I have to say, I did really like Dani and Jamie's relationship. I have a few nitpicks with it, but overall, I thought it was really beautiful. I loved, as same as you, I love the fact that we have a lesbian relationship at the heart of it.
Yep.
The fact that that's the real love story, that's the real kind of romantic gothic romance of the whole thing, as opposed to Rebecca and Peter.
Yep.
I think that's sort of the detour that we take.
Yes.
And that ends pretty quickly, and actually the underlying love story actually is Dani and Jamie and Hannah and Owen as well.
Exactly.
I was really sad that Hannah and Owen couldn't end up together, but also the tribute to her with his restaurant at the end, I thought was very beautiful, very page 28.
See, you didn't hate episode 8. 9.
But
Anna, but
I feel like I'm being so mean. I'm trying to be so nice with this.
I know, you're good. You're doing very well. I feel like people will be screaming, listening to you, going, just be mean to her. Look at my little face. Would you be mean to this face?
I cannot be mean to that face or to that accent. You know that. Okay. The Moonflower Discourse.
Yes.
No. No. The fuck was that all about?
Oh God, I forgave it that. See, I
You hated it too,
I forgave it that. I mean, I didn't. I mean, I wasn't in for that. Like, I was literally like, just kiss. Just kiss. Just kiss.
Quite.
Just leave the flowers.
Yeah.
Just kiss. Kiss. That's it. That's all you need to do. But, you know, it's a gothic romance. What are you going to do? You're going to have a bit of poetry about flowers? Sure.
Although I have to say, the thing that I love most about Dani and Jamie's relationship is Dani's just utter... Victoria Pedretti is so good at very much acting with her face.
Yes.
And her sort of desperation almost in her face to kiss Jamie was so beautiful.
It was adorable.
It was so nice. And Jamie's reservation as well. Like, is this girl a tourist? Like, what's happening? Like, I don't want to get involved as someone who's just like, oh, I'm just going to have a fling with this
totally
hot gardener girl
it's
that
a
we
hot
have.
gardener.
I mean, I am into the idea that they're subverting the hot gardener thing from at an estate manor, from maybe, you know, a burly 40-something man to a hot 30-something young woman in overalls.
She was wearing Doc Martens quite a lot. I liked it.
Yeah, wearing blondie t-shirts as well. Yeah.
Yep.
That was very well noted. However, you know, I'll accept that. I'll allow that.
Yep, you are.
The Moonflower speech.
Yep. Okay.
Step too far.
Yep.
Step too far.
Okay, that's fine.
However, them ending up owning a flower shop, living in the most beautiful apartment.
Adorable.
Gorgeous. Love it.
Absolutely adorable.
Here for it.
Yep.
However, let's talk about the bookend.
Okay.
What did you make of the framing device of the story of Bly Manor, which is told to us by, we find out at the end,
Yep.
an older Jamie,
Yes.
played by Carla Gugino,
Yep.
a goddess amongst people,
Yeah, absolutely.
but not good at accents.
Do you know something? Now, the accent I didn't mind, and actually closer to the end when she put on the gardener's accent for about 2 minutes, I actually thought was really sweet, because I thought she got away with that accent. Because it was almost like this is a reminder that this is who you are. You've already been hammered with this. You know who I am now, but I'm just going to tell you in this accent. And I actually quite liked that. But as a framing device, like, I love the idea of it being a story within a story. I like that. That's how ghost stories should be told, in front of a fire to a captive audience. So I was totally happy for that to be the framing of it. And the fact that was Flora's wedding, that was lovely. Sad again. More sads, just endless amounts of sad, like just beat up my broken heart already, just hammer it into the ground. But I liked it. We have time and wine enough for a story, and I enjoyed it. So I liked that wrapping. It felt very formal, very Sunday night BBC drama, but I was there for that. I was there for that. And also, it was the excuse to use the turn of the screw and saying the title at the start of the first episode, which I really also enjoyed. That's when you have to take a drink.
I do like the framing device, but do you like the fact that it's all the same characters? Older, but I'm mincing my words so much here.
Pick your words.
The fact that it's set in 2007.
Yeah.
And that they're presented as quite, in their 50s, let's say that.
Mm-hmm.
And they're much younger in 1987. But does that add up to how we meet them in 2007? Or did they age an additional 10, 15 years?
I didn't even think about the maths, Anna.
Oh. I couldn't think of anything else.
That's because by that point you were so miserable. I didn't even think about the maths. I didn't think about it. I didn't care. It had me. I'm so sorry. I didn't care. I didn't I was here for the dream logic. I was here for the ghost logic. I was here for the relationship. I wasn't there for the moonflower. I was there for the gardener. Okay. Episode 5, yes, and not so much the uncle.
Did you?
But I was by that point. I was well in. I was happy. I was like, this is great. It almost reminded me of the kind of feeling that I used to get at the end of movies in the 90s when I used to watch them as kids, of not cynicism, with no cynicism whatsoever. Because by that point, it had me basically in the same way that Viola had someone around the throat. It was just like, well, that's my emotional. It had me around the emotional throat, and that was me. I was fully drawn in. And I didn't think about the maths. And I'm sorry that by that point you were adding up the maths. Because that was clearly what was left in your brain by that point, was, it doesn't even add up. I mean, that was...
Well, no, but I genuinely want to know, though. Did you see it coming?
Yes. I knew there would be some connection. Because precisely because nothing there is an accident.
Yeah.
Because nothing, and I think that comes from, that comes from good filmmaking, and it also comes from expectations from watching a certain filmmaker, and that nothing is there by mistake. Nothing has just been left in shot. There's no Starbucks cups left in your Game of Thrones screen when it's a Mike Flanagan TV series, and I think being aware that everything has a place and everything has a narrative purpose, I did not mind that the framing device had a thing, because we've watched a lot of horror anthologies, haven't we? And the last horror is always in the real world, not in the last short story. And that's it. That is the rule of anthologies. And this is an anthology. So it was, of course, going to have that reveal. That reveal was there. I didn't mind the reveal. I tried not to think about the ages. And then it was done, and then I cried some more, and then...
And, I mean, the bookend is one aspect of it.
Yeah.
But you kind of sort of mentioned it a little bit, but the actual ending, the ending that ends with Jamie.
Yes.
And her leaving the door open.
Door open. Yep. And the idea...
What did you make of it?
What did I make of it through racking sobs? I would like it noted that I am not normally an emotional, super squishy person. So this had really sneaked in and wormed its way into me to make me have these feelings. These are not my normal... I don't normally cry at adverts, except maybe like the puppies that you need to adopt and stuff. But no, like genuinely, that last sequence was beautiful. The fact that hand on her shoulder, the ring, it was the same ring that they proposed with. And I like the idea of, again, that ghost logic of her being there and not showing herself, for good reason. The logic of Jamie's alive and should not be trying to quest to the bottom of a lake. And I think even in that shot of her trying to swim down to the bottom of the lake and not being able to stay down, I think that even that very logic of humans, you can't sink, because that is literally for the dead. That is not for you. And the fact that she's paddling to try and stay down there with her and she can't is a wonderful example of exactly the difference between it, because where the earlier parts of the season had ghosts and people intermingling and choosing and not leaving, this was a very final ending of no, you need to leave her there. That is now that is now not the rules. And I think I enjoyed that change of rules. I think you understood then that you couldn't just walk around arm in arm with a ghost. That was no longer acceptable. And understanding that the story had switched to that painful reality. And I think it deals with that very cleverly of they have been intermingling and realities and dreams and memories, only to go into a future where none of those things can exist in a reassuring bubble, literally. It's just the matter of the living and the dead. And I think it did a very good job of differentiating between the two, but then giving us that moment of hope at the end of, it's okay, one of them can see the other. And even that in itself is heartbreaking, because Danny can see her and not love her. So that's heartbreaking for everyone. Yeah.
So I got lost in your words.
It's the accent.
Because, well, yeah. But also, no, I love a predictable bookend.
Yes.
I did not like the way they dealt with it in this situation, but I did love the ending. For all those reasons, and also because I think it makes such a beautiful parallel to Peter and Rebecca's relationship, where that is twisted and that is not love, and Danny and Jamie's relationship is, and part of it is also Danny's self-sacrificial nature. And I wanted to ask you kind of about, well, you mentioned it, but we haven't really talked about Danny's choice to sacrifice herself and how it relates to this guilt that she has been carrying throughout at least the first half of the season, relating to her ex-fiance's death. And once that is sort of mended through her relationship with Jamie, the idea of still having to sacrifice herself feels like a hardening back to it.
Yeah, I guess I never really thought of the fact that this was her balancing things out, really, because I think because I was so on the side of the fact that she didn't need to feel guilty for what happened. It just happened. But then I just what I did love about her sacrificing herself was the fact that it happened at the very start of the episode of episode 9, and I was like, where's the rest of the episode going to go if everyone saved the day now? And then it's like, well, you've not really saved the day. You've just kind of staved off the day to hurt you at a future point. And I did like the idea of Viola as a passenger. But yeah, I guess I was almost mad at Danny for her sacrifice. But at the same time, that's great. Flora lives and gets to love and has a wedding. And that's great. But also at the expense of Danny having a wedding and having to love and live and not just be at the bottom of a lake.
I'm going to say something controversial.
Go
But I
for
think
it.
you might like it.
Go for it.
I wish Danny had lived and the kids had been gone.
Yeah, me too. Yep.
Fuck the kids.
I wish. Yep. Because
I hate those kids so much.
they'd already shown the kids dying. They'd already shown that faceless kid dying. Flora could have just died. Flora could have just walked in there, and I would not have been any sadder. And it would have been perfectly splendid for me.
Oh, you've just given me PTSD. Literally.
Perfectly splendid.
I mean, I'm already going to hell. It's fine. Whatever.
Me too.
I have never loathed a child as much as I hated Miles.
Miles, yeah, I really didn't like Miles. I think I wrote a couple of things down about Miles. I was furious about Miles.
When Miles is being possessed by Peter.
Oh yeah, see I kind of did that Twitch thing again.
I had to bury my face under the blanket I was in because I was
okay.
like, the level
Yes.
of terrible thoughts that are going through my head right now
Yep.
should never be broadcast.
Yep.
Why those actors?
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Because you wonder, because I'm trying to think of other things where children have been possessed, because it's always Ox, right? It's really Ox. It's weird and strange because
it's
you're having
always difficult.
Yeah, because you're having to make kids act, but it's fine when everyone's grown up. So the prime example is what Faith and Buffy. Like Faith and Buffy, Sarah Michelle Gellar and Eliza Dushku can act like each other, and they're really good at it because they're grown up and they're actresses. But I do think there's a big challenge when suddenly you go, right, kids, you need to act like a grown up.
Yeah.
And especially when they are such angelic looking children, putting a little flat cap on him and giving him a lighter is not going to make him Peter Quint. It's just not. And I think that's an inherent challenge, which, despite the fact that, yes, I think the actors could have done something slightly different. I do think it's a challenge, and potentially shouldn't have even been plotted that way.
Yeah, I do. I agree with you. It's really difficult casting kid actors. I think particularly because the kids in Hill House were so charismatic and so good.
Oh, they were so good. They were so good.
I like, it was such a stark comparison, and I know it's
Yeah.
unfair to place those types of expectations, but because it's by the same creators,
Of course.
and it's inevitable to compare it. I thought those kids were really bad, and actually, to your point earlier before, it is a challenge. So actually, when a child actor or a teenage actor pulls off performing it as an adult, it's
Yes.
so amazing. I'm
Yeah.
thinking of the young actor who plays Five in The Umbrella Academy. Essentially, it's like a 15-year-old kid who portrays throughout 2 seasons a basically 50-something-year-old assassin who's
Right.
already lived that entire life. And, it's a sci-fi show, so it's all very
Yeah.
heightened, but
Yeah.
and then comes back and is sort of trapped in his own prepubescent body. And he does that kind of adult trapped in a kid's body performance amazingly well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't even find Flora and Miles creepy, which I thought was, the most annoying thing. The fact that they weren't creepy enough.
I found Flora quite creepy sometimes.
Oh.
I found her quite creepy because I found her quite disconnected. But also, I think there's a certain type of, especially with that accent, I do think that they're a certain type of child. Both of them are. And they're both precocious and very annoying. And I think sometimes I find it more acceptable, like just because we're very used to listening to American kids be brilliant. And I think sometimes British kids have this kind of, oh gosh, I'm watching a period drama now. And initially with the Perfectly Splendid stuff, I was just like, what is this? But then I did actually come round to that, oddly.
Yeah.
I found it quite endearing and sweet.
Yeah. At the end, it felt more like a protective chant than anything else.
Yeah. And I enjoyed hating them when they locked her in the cupboard. Like, that was proper, like, evil moments. I enjoyed that very much. That was a good thing. But yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yes.
Did you the question that I'm meaning to ask is kind of about the setting and the character of the whole show, because you bring up an interesting point of kind of when we see these British kids, we almost expect like a period piece or a BBC drama. And obviously this is set in the UK. Not a lot of the actors are British. Their accents, as we've described, sometimes are questionable, sometimes work
Yes.
well.
Yes.
But overall, did you get a sense of place from Bly Manor? Did the sort of the design and the overall vibe of the show feel British enough for you?
Do you know, I think it did, but I think I found it heightened. And because there are so many familiar actors from Hill House, it has that anthology feel that when American Horror Story happens. So when you start a new season of American Horror Story, you spend the first episode going, oh, so you're you, and you're you, and you're you. And that comes with its own set of expectations. And it's almost like an expectation around who you expect. It's very theatrical almost, because you've got the same actors, you have the same faces, but they are doing different things, you know? So I think once I had got over that, I did feel a sense of place there. I felt a strong enough sense of place there that I could then build all the mythology around it and the science around it and the ghost stuff around it and forgive its inconsistencies and imperfections in a way that I know everyone won't, and I know you haven't. But I think because of that sense of place and connection and characters, I forgave it a lot of its strange inconsistency, sort of uneven nature in those ways. I was willing to forgive a lot more precisely because of that character.
And what are some of those, you know, I always like talking about things that we disagree on anyway, because I'm seeing things in a way that I hadn't perceived it when I was watching it.
Yeah.
But what are some of those inconsistencies that you think some people might pick up on and that you picked up on and forgave the show?
I think my biggest one is actually one of the episode about the uncle. I really didn't like that episode. I found the repetition of being in his office very annoying. I found his routine refusal to speak to Danny about the kids very annoying. I felt like any time that we were away from Bly Manor, I wanted a really good reason for us to be, and that wasn't a good enough reason to be. I did feel like that was a thing. Anytime we went away from there, I felt disconnected and strange, and he was unnecessary. So I think actually there's a whole episode in there that I find not an inconsistency, but certainly a misstep, because I feel like without that, I didn't really need that episode. You could have easily sprinkled in the fact that he was Flora's father in smarter ways. Or even in Hannah's episode, we could have seen him there, you know, her questioning, why is he here? You know, she sees everything. As the housekeeper, she saw everything. And I think that would have been a really clever way to show that. So I feel like that was my biggest thing that I overcame, really, was going, I don't really like this episode. There's been unevenness. I know obviously it's the Peter Quint accent that made me twitch slightly because it was so close to being Scottish, but not.
And what did you think of it visually? Because I find it interesting with these types of shows. Usually you get kind of a director who's already an established name to set the tone and the visual style of the series with the first couple of episodes, and then they sort of go away. Mike Flanagan did direct quite a few episodes of Hill House, but only directed the first one of Bly Manor, and then every other director has been a different person. Did you find that the whole show visually was consistent enough, or did you like any particular episodes more, aside from the baby daddy one? Did the design of the show with the particular episodes work more or less for you, considering that they're all being made by different people?
I actually found it really cohesive. I didn't feel like there was there was no whiplash moments, so to speak. There wasn't anything that I thought, oh gosh, this doesn't fit here. You didn't like the black and white episode. I actually really did like the black and white episode. I liked all the hissing candles, and I liked handfuls of keys and close-ups on keys and locks and all of those things that I found really tropey, but exactly what I wanted to see in a black and white episode, which was revealing a Lady of the Lake, you know. So I was all in for that. I was like, this is like the movie that you see before a ride to set the theme of the roller coaster. Like, I am so here for this. Which I guess says something about how I was feeling at the time and the fact that I was going through it in that way, and that was the kind of attitude I was taking to it. But I don't think there was anything particularly visually that I found very different between. I did find episode 5, Hannah's sort of jumping through things. I found it very clever. I found it very seamless. I really enjoyed her opening doors and finding herself in new places, which is really hard to do well. That is dream logic, and that's really hard to do well without making you feel seasick. And I think its pacing was especially impressive. So she'd stop, and then she'd finally remember why she was in that place, and she would have the conversation with Rebecca in the church, or she would have the conversation with the lady of the manor outside, or she would be somewhere else. So I enjoyed, oh, I'm somewhere else. Oh, I actually belong here for a second, and going through those memories. So I think I found that in terms of directorial flow was the most invisible, I suppose. It was the hidden ghost. Did you not?
I really liked episode 5. That was my favorite episode.
No, your director. Did you notice differences?
I noticed that some episodes were less artful. And as we've discussed, we mostly disagree on episode 8. I thought it was although I love all of that stuff that you're describing, it's just that the visually felt quite flat and plain and a little bit cheap, which annoyed me because it's not a cheap production.
It's not cheap. No, it's very much not cheap.
Exactly. And I didn't feel the same visual flourish through all the episodes as I did consistently. The basics were there, but I felt like some of the episodes were a little too BBC drama for my expectations of it.
Yes.
Again,
I can see that.
Yeah. There was, I had a lot of issues with some of the design of it, but that's also so niche.
No, yeah, that might be a different podcast.
Yeah. Is there anything we haven't touched upon that you feel is really, really important to talk about Bly Manor?
I think the one thing that I will say is, if we're talking about it on a technical standpoint, is obviously we were all completely obsessed with that one episode in Hill House that was all one shot. And I understand why there is not an episode like that, because it would be an automatic comparison. But I suppose a part of me would have loved not an episode like that specifically, but an episode that did something challenging in that way, that challenged its situation. And I think it was missing some of that. And I do think, though, by its very nature, by the fact that Bly Manor is not Hill House and is an understated, very much understated ghost story, especially if you're not looking for anything hidden in the background, I can appreciate that it's not that. And a flashy one-shot thing, I guess, would have ruined that. But I think I would have loved a sort of a wave of, oh, look, we're doing the same thing, we are just as smart. But I do think they did very many smart things, but much more understated, I suppose. So I suppose that's my love and hate moment is, I understand why they did it, but I would kind of loved another technical achievement like that, which, watching the behind the scenes of that episode was next level stuff. Like, it was incredible.
Yeah, I actually think, because you're much smarter than me, you've just articulated, I think, my annoyance with it, and it's the fact that it was missing that flourish, at least in one episode. And I actually think that episode 8 is probably that. Whether it works or not kind of will depend on everyone who's watching it.
It's
it
very
worked for
subjective.
It worked for you, did not work for me, but I think that was probably the attempt at that flourish. That was
a bold decision. It is a bold decision.
Yeah, we gotta respect that.
No pun intended. It is a bold decision, and I totally get why it's very much Marmite in that way. I do get it, and I think the whole show will be Marmite for a lot of people. I think, in general.
I think, do you know what? It did not work for me, but I actually really respect the bold decision. Like, if I think if it was just better directed, I would have loved it. I loved the decision, didn't love the execution. But that's a really good point. But I think it is going to split opinion.
Yes.
But do you think contemporary horror fans will enjoy this?
I think horror fans expecting a scare fest like Hill House will be disappointed. I think horror fans who will go, I'm not watching a scare fest, I'm watching a lovely rich ghost story that I found beautiful all the way through, even the black and white episode I found especially glorious. I think Axel Carolyn did a really beautiful job of it. I loved what she did, but I do think that there will be people who go, this is not what I signed up for, and I get it. And I guess that's why anthology shows are the joy that they are, right? Sometimes you watch Murder House and then you don't like Asylum, or you love Asylum and you don't like Coven. I think that will happen, and there better be more of this. Because he said he was making an anthology, right? So it's a haunting series, it's not a haunting 2. So there will be more, and it better get into production now.
Just to wrap up our conversation about it, I did find a theme of the show to be really fascinating, really romantic actually. And it's this idea in the series that a story can belong to someone. And who do you think the story of Bly Manor ultimately belongs to?
It's funny, isn't it? Because you think it's Danny's story, but it seems to be Jamie's. But I think it's got Danny's heart in it. And it's Danny that we see as the hand on the shoulder. So I think it is Danny's story entirely, even when she is gone, because she is the representation of what's harnessing the nastiness. She beat the big bad. So, yeah, she is its absolute beating heart. And, I love it.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize. Thank you. And I'm sorry because I didn't like it like I expected.
That's okay.
to.
That's okay. This is why it's glorious that we are different.
Louise, thank you so much for your beautiful analysis of The Haunting of Bly Manor.
Thank you for having me.
And where can people find out more about your work online?
You can find me on Twitter at shiny_demon. And you will find all of my various nonsense bits there.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.